This week on AtoZrunning, we target the effects of aging on running performance for this week's search engine challenge.
In the world of running, Valencia Marathon was insanely fast.
Track season is off with a bang at the Boston opener.
And make your prediction now. How fast do you think 60-year-old Anne Gilshinan ran 1 mile?
All this and more on AtoZrunning. Hey everyone, welcome back to AtoZrunning, where we help runners thrive with information, inspiration, and coaching services. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. And remember that you can learn everything you need to know about our services at AtoZrunning.com. And check us out where we share content the most: Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube.
We love to hear from you. We really do. And it's been so fun to connect with the community in the last couple years. It was refreshing after that season of no races and stuff a few years ago, just getting to know more of you. And I don't know, it's my favorite part, I think, of having AtoZrunning.
Andy's getting nostalgic.
I am.
Let me tell you about the last 10 years of our lives.
I know.
So speaking of the last couple of weeks of our lives, it's winter where we live, and it was made apparent to us recently when it snowed a whole bunch and got really cold suddenly, which we don't terribly mind in one sense because we like the snow, because it makes it feel like, the winter wonderland kind of sense. Like there's a kind of romance to the first falling snow until January hits and it's a foot
Old.
deep and it won't get warmer than 15 degrees out and all of that.
And we have 3 more months of it.
But for now, it's kind of fun. And it also is a time when we just like to do things differently, training-wise. We've been talking with a number of our runners who are pursuing things in a similar sense as well. And it's simply because if you live in an area where the weather fluctuates this severely, there are times when you just don't love going outside and running as much as other times. Like if it's dark, like you wake up, at early hours and it's always dark, but if you want to go for a run at 4 p.m, you have to bring your headlamp because it's going to be dark before you finish and all of that. So many of you listening are in that boat, whether it's because you live in some of the northern hemispheres right now or some of the southern hemispheres another time of the year, but whatever the case may be, we find that it's good to change things up. And we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast. And so this is what we're doing now. And we went together to the weight room a week ago, which, anytime
we didn't fight.
Anytime Andy and Zach do the same activity together, it's a coin flip whether or not there's bickering and all of that. But we
love each other, guys. You know that, right?
we went to, people should probably know then that we're married.
Yes.
So that's why we talk like
that.
For
15 years, yeah.
And we, that was a joke. And we did start our weight room time. And so it was kind of like disorienting, right? Like, oh, how do we do this again? What are the lifts that we want to focus on? Of course, we had a plan and knew that ahead of time, but that I like it. I like the difference. And so I get in the weight room generally only 2 or 3 months out of the year. Sometimes there's other things going on and I'm going to need to other times, and
he does do maintenance work all year through his seasons and
I'm not
stuff,
talking
but
about
it's
strength
not
work.
The same type of thing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about strength work specifically. I'm talking about the weight room specifically. Strength work broadly. So strengthening is actually, we're going to talk about that on our topic today.
Sweet.
As it pertains to
I love when things
aging.
Coordinate.
The vast majority of you listening here are going to need to ask the question, if you're not already asking it, what should I be doing to make sure that my increasing age does not have a negative effect on my running performance? We have answers to that, and the search engines were actually quite helpful.
Fantastic.
We'll talk about that shortly. But I did want to mention that when it comes to the weight room transition and running on treadmills and the indoor stuff and everything, it is the kind of thing where it's not my preference. If I had my druthers, I would be running in 85 degrees. I'd live in Orlando, Florida in the June and August months year round. Just have that be the weather year round. I love humidity. My skin is much better in humidity than it is in these winter months. My hands are bleeding every time I make a fist. But as it were, I don't have that. And so instead what we do is we say, for this season of training, what are some things I can do and how can I dive full into it and enjoy it? And so I do like running on the treadmill for a bit. And yes, it does get old eventually. Actually, I just learned, did you know that treadmill actually used to be a punishment?
Really?
The origin of the treadmill. Do you know the origin of the treadmill?
This is news to me. This is
great. I learned this while listening to an author reading aloud The Christmas Carol and talking about talking about Victorian England, and she was giving some histories and things. So anyway, we got to talk about it now for at least a brief moment.
Yeah.
The treadmill, the name, right? So start with that. Treadmill, okay, was a kind of device that powered like a mill, like for crushing corn, for like a regular kind of mill, right? They use mills for a lot of different reasons. But anyway, the point is this is a kind of device that powered that. And it was powered by humans standing on the belt thing and pushing it by walking with their feet. And who did they get to do that? Criminals, the poor who couldn't sustain themselves. They would put them to work in the mill.
Wow.
And feed them and house them, right? And so it was a kind of punishment for a lot of people. And that's why when you think of the treadmill today and you think this feels like torture, you're not the only one historically who felt that way.
Wow.
Right?
I never knew this. This is just very new information for me, and I'm kind of chewing on it.
Which is also why those manual treadmills that you have to like push with your legs that don't have motors are even more closely aligned with the original design and torturous design of treadmills.
Interesting.
All right.
Now it makes me think like we should be doing something productive with our treadmills, generating energy or crushing corn. I don't know. Instead of just running like 20 miles on a treadmill, there could be some like productivity coming out of it. Besides fitness.
Well, okay, we can work on a device that like generates electricity from the treadmill. That would probably be the simplest function. I mean, it costs electricity to run it, so you'd have to use the manual ones.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know, but maybe the net result of the electricity it takes to run it and the electricity you can generate.
Like our Zero Runner.
Yeah, well, that's different. We could generate electricity with that because that's purely mechanical. But anyway, we're off on a
this is a tangent.
Really aside. So we actually like it. That's my point. We like the time in the weight room for a bit. It reminds me that I am very much a weak distance runner with arms that are more or less useless. And so it would be good for me to spend some time making them stronger so they're not so useless. Like things like holding dumbbells for 10 reps of something is hard when I first started doing it. Just holding them, like my grip strength is so low. That's not how it should be. So this is why it's good to have these times when we
focus,
do things a little different.
Yeah.
All right.
So as far as an update with me, I was like dead to the world last week because I was sick. But I am continuing to enjoy the improvements of my back health. And I am just so grateful. When you go through long periods of your life, decade, probably for me, with some kind of back pain, it is so incredibly rewarding and exhilarating to have that finally not be a key problem to my living or just a nuisance. So I'm excited because I've asked the PT who helped me, Stephanie Penny, to come on the podcast, and we've recorded those episodes and they're upcoming. So you're going to want to stay tuned for those. It's going to be about back health. So all runners, spoiler alert, need to listen to this because everyone needs their back for their kinetic chain. So there will be nuggets for you too.
You need your back.
From this.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, we look forward to that, certainly. And many thanks to Stephanie and the folks at Endurance Rehab with the good work they do. Speaking of good things to talk about, let's go ahead now and talk about our latest challenge with the search engine. All right, here we go. We have our latest topic now where we attempted to search a question and then find what the search engines had to say about it and react to them, respond to them. This has been our latest series. It's been an investigation of what does the internet have to tell us about the things that runners are the most interested in and how can we find the best sources on these types of things. what stands out, what doesn't, all of the things. And I should note that we have opened the door to how your reactions as our listeners. What questions would you be interested in? What things would you like us to try to find or find out about, and all of that. And one question in particular came from listener Pete, and we felt this was timely. And so we wanted to share our thoughts here. And that question is, what are the effects of aging on running performance? Which is a great question. We've all seen kind of like generalizations on this topic, but do we know what really there is to know about it? And can we find that in the top 5 search results on the internet? So let's go for it. First up, by the way, number 1 result shocked me. This has not happened yet in our efforts. And that's because the first result was a university resource from Furman University as the number 1 search result. And then it got stranger because not only was it a university resource, it was a PDF from Furman University, which defies all the algorithms. But that's what happened. And this, by the way, not just Furman University, but an institute within Furman called the Furman Institute for Running and Scientific Training, which is then the acronym is FIRST. And so the FIRST organization publishes and provides coaching resources. There's a book written by some of their leaders, I suppose. And there's a lot of different kinds of content related to this organization. But this in particular appeared to just be what looks like a PDF of a presentation, or like a presentation notes. And that was very strange to me. And so first, my hopes were really high when I saw what it was from. My hopes got a little bit lower when I realized it's just like a PDF of the slideshow that they might have used at some kind of presentation, which I find to be really odd for the number 1 search result. But I don't understand how the algorithm works, obviously, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. Was the information effective? Perhaps, but it was also a little bit underwhelming, and because they listed points and provided no sources, and didn't really, because it's a slideshow, and so it's not going into depth. It's not explaining the concepts. It's just giving you pointers. The presentation itself was probably much more interesting than the slide notes by themselves. So I looked at this and I thought, I would have loved to hear this presentation, and that would have been really something. But instead, I don't know exactly what the presenters had to say about the things on their slides. I only know what was on their slides. And as I personally would never want to be judged by the notes on a slideshow that I made, I hope that this is true here. But I'll give you the quick summary of what was shared in these slide notes. Aging begins to show negative effects around age 35. We've seen that in a number of places. So that makes sense. They were using the number 0.5% decline every year after age 35, which then begins to increase further after age 60. Keep those numbers in mind, because we're actually going to find conflicting data from multiple different sources here as we go through our 5 results. And so this is always going to be interesting to me. Who's most right, and how do we know they're most right? But they say in this slideshow 0.5% decline after age 35, and then after age 60 it starts to increase more. Okay, that's one statistic without sources, and so I don't know where that comes from, but that's what they shared. What can we do about it? Vigorous training reduces the decrement to some degree. Max heart rate is the chief reason why there's a decline in performance, because your max heart rate goes down as you age. But also there's more, because connective tissues rigidify, and because your tendons and ligaments are getting stiffer, your body's not moving as well. You also can get injured more easily as a result of that. So all of those things are interrelated. Then there's a bone density thing, but I guess they don't really go into that one here, so I shouldn't probably say that. There's more, but that's what they had to share here in this one. And their conclusions were stretch more, or keep mobility as a regular part, substantial amount of time of mobility. And then also they suggest lowering volume but keeping intensity going, which if the heart rate decrease is the biggest concern, this suggestion is actually kind of backwards, because if you want to offset a heart rate decline, a max heart rate decline, then aerobic condition is even more important, and you need volumes of running to increase your capillary density and things like that. And so I don't know what exactly again, I have no explanation because I wasn't listening to the presentation. I was just reading the slide notes. So I don't want to judge it too harshly one way or another, but it seems to be providing some key pointers that could be helpful. But I don't want to stop there, because if I'm looking for good information on the topic, I only got like a couple bullet points here, and that was not much. So let's move to number 2 on the search results list, and that was the videos. And so the way Google does it, you get sometimes just like a handful of videos in the search results, and they're all kind of just lumped together in a list. And so I just clicked on the first one because, again, we're just seeing what the first things give us. And the first video is entitled "The Huge Problem with Running as You Get Older and What to Do About It" by Coach Perry, which is an organization in particular, and his name as well as Perry, who he offers various kinds of resources, material, and training services. So a couple of notes here. Coach Perry specifies the 2 key culprits for this decline are aerobic capacity and lean muscle mass. As they're getting into this, they're sharing a little bit of referencing some material, but they don't really get into like sources and references much. And so I'm not exactly sure where their material is coming from either, but they talk in generalities predominantly, the 2 individuals who are speaking on the video. And aerobic capacity going down, lean muscle mass going down amounts to poorer performance. Sarcopenia, which is a term I had not heard before this video, is the term for the decline in strength through the loss of muscle mass. You lose strength because you're losing muscle mass, is what they said. And then aerobic frailty is another concept that they were discussing a bit. And that is the point at which you basically decline to a degree that there's a line now that they call aerobic frailty once you get beneath that line. And there's actually like a VO2 max number for it. It's 18, which is very, very low. If you're familiar with VO2 max numbers, 18 is really the pits, which is why it is termed frailty. Interestingly enough, though, they shared in the video, if you're active aerobically throughout your life, your aerobic frailty happens 30 years later than someone who's sedentary throughout their lives. And so that's pretty incredible. So your ongoing aerobic activity is meaning that you reach the poorer state of aerobic health substantially later than you would otherwise. And that's really cool. So keep up the activity. Don't stop. That's what they're saying. Strength training also becomes more important as you age because you're losing lean muscle mass, and you can offset that loss with strength work. An 80-year-old has the same muscle mass, an 80-year-old, who is doing ongoing regular strength work has the same muscle mass as a 50-year-old who leads a sedentary life. Yes, you heard it. Again, that 30 years. You're offsetting by 30 years. Now, very few people actually live completely sedentary lives. So really, we're talking about if you want to compare yourself to a 50-year-old, then maybe it's like 65. You could be 65 and have the lean muscle mass of a 50-year-old who was not quite as active as you, for instance. Okay, so the strength work is key. The aerobic work is key. That's what we're getting here. 1 to 3% muscle mass loss per decade in your 30s and 40s. That increases in your 50s and increases further beyond that. So muscle mass loss is a big culprit, and that's where they spent their focus in this video. They were talking about strength routines, strengthening through exercises and various types of things. Also, apparently, it's even more important for women than it is for men because the lean muscle mass loss accelerates more dramatically after age 50 for women than it does for men. But again, no sources or research provided for these things, and so I don't know exactly where their information is coming from. I would love to be able to see that in more detail and depth as well. So that's 2. We're 2 sources in, and we're already getting some pretty helpful information, but some conflicting information a little bit. And we want to find out where some of the sources are for these things, and we still haven't reached that yet. So let's keep reading. Number 3, and this is where we hit the home run. We hit the home run with number 3, where we get confirmation of a lot of the research, but then we start to get the links to studies. This is incredible. So this source now is the Marathon Handbook, a website, themarathonhandbook.com, or rather, marathonhandbook.com. And the article is entitled, "Do Runners Slow Down as They Age? How Age Affects Running." So 2 things stood out to me right away. endnotes and footnotes. They actually footnoted their claims with hyperlinks to studies and to other sources. I love it. We've got the research now. And the approach in this article is basically, here are the key things you need to know. And they give like summarizing claims and then explain them. And so not only do you get like the headlining bullet points, but you get depth of explanation. The people writing this article know their stuff, and in particular share where it comes from, which I very much appreciate. So this is really good. Now, beyond that, I would note that there's also an insane amount of ads on this website, and it was very annoying. So you're going to have to deal with that. But here's what we get. What is the nature of the age effect on running? And here's what they had to share. Age results in ongoing studies show 0.2% increase in finish time for 15K. So they looked at a study where they said, okay, over the course of like 7 years, how does their 15K performance? And there was a 0.2% increase in finish time. That's an interesting statistic, and some pretty rigorous research by the like 7 years worth there. Also, they looked at age group world records, another study, and they said, okay, based on age group world records, which are 5-year increments, they see, and the researchers see, a 1% decrease in performance between 35 to 40 total. So that's just 1% total between ages 35 and 40. And then, and this is where, remember our stat earlier, this is where we see a deviation. And then they found that there's a 1% per year decrease in performance between ages 40 to 70. And this is, we're talking world record age group performances. So these are the very best in each age group. But that's telling, right? That's very informative. And so that 0.5% we got from the Furman resource is right away is we're seeing, no, that doesn't seem to hold up. And the studies here are pretty consistent. And then they also looked at age group records up to age 95, which is awesome. And by age 90, runners are only a little more than twice as slow as their peak. You heard me. By age 90, they're a little more than twice as slow as their peak, which is obviously a lot slower. Like we're talking about twice as long to finish a race, but you're 90 years old. And so that's cool. Those are the very best, remember. And so that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same person, because we're comparing record to record, not person to person. And that matters because we don't actually know if this statistic would consistently remain true if I run at age 20, 25, 30, 35, and so on, up to age 95, which is how far they went. If that's the case, would I have twice as slow at age 90 than I did in my peak? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out hopefully. And so now we get some what and it's really interesting. But then there's a why, and this is where they get into. I think this is really helpful. So everything gets worse as you age. This is why does running performance get worse as you age? Well, the first answer is because everything, right? Because our bodies are decaying, or at least they are not replicating anymore at a cellular level, and to the degree you need to. And so cells are dying, which means we are not as much as we were before the cells were dying. So that includes lean muscle mass decline. You see that phrase popping up again, which, by the way, that decline, according to their research here, can be delayed until about age 50 with training, both strength and intensity. And so we're talking lean muscle mass, not aerobic capacity, but lean muscle mass decline can be delayed quite a bit with regular strength work and regular types of intensity in our training, and we'll talk about what that might be specifically. Motor control degradation is another area of concern, and this didn't come up in any other resources yet, but this is a really important consideration. It basically means my ability to move my muscles is worsening as I age, and that's not surprising because the motor units, which connect my nerves to my muscle tissues, are also decaying, just like the rest of my body as I age. And so that means that I can't, even if I have great muscles, I can't get them to do the thing I want them to do as well, both quickly and as strongly at their maximum capacity. And so that tells me there's more to the story than just my max heart rate's lower and lean muscle mass is lower. There's other things going on here. And so then the authors, again, I just really appreciate this article. The authors then talk about, well, what do you do about something like motor control degradation? And the answer is, well, actually, you can do things about that. It's not just an inevitability. Well, it is an inevitability in a sense, but there are certain things that can help. So we'll get into that too in just a moment. The authors will, at least. Okay, how about this 2016 study that found, quote, in fact, with each additional decade of life, the stride length of runners in the study, as well as their running speed, decreased by about 20%. So we're not talking about max performance potential, right? 20% is way higher than any of the other stats we've seen so far. But over the course of 10 years, stride length and running speed decreased by 20%. And that is very telling. So you're actually just not moving. You're not covering as much ground with each stride length. You're not moving your legs as quickly with each stride. And that is no doubt a huge part of the decline. So this is why I think this article is so rich, because now what they do here, what the authors do here, is they say, okay, all of these things in consideration, what can we do about this? There's a lot going on here, and they tackle them all directly. First, we got to do the strength work. Exercises, building muscle mass, lean muscle mass in particular, which is our fast twitch muscles, which is things like high weight, low rep, which is things like explosive activities like plyometric types of strength, that type of stuff. That's really good. That's really valuable. In fact, next one down here is hills. Hills are really important because they do a couple of things at once and combine some of these areas of weakness. And so if neuromuscular in demand is necessary, hills are good for that because they're asking us to do things with our muscles that are both difficult and uncommon, like raising your knees higher than normal to go up the hill, like pushing off harder than normal to go up the hill. And if they found in the stride length study in particular, they found that the actual push off the ground was degrading over time. Hill workouts help to condition our command of those muscles at a greater way. So neuromuscular element of that, but also the strength needed to do so. Speed in what you're doing, at a high level of intensity as well. How about running form drills? Yes, running form drills. They actually say that. It's in the article. And in particular, why should we do these things? Well, not only because they're just good to, warm you up and stuff, but they actually keep that neuromuscular activity high and on a regular basis. So you're taking command of your muscles and you're forcing them to do things. Now, when we talk about running form drills, we're not just talking about like doing a little bit of skips, kind of casual skips. We're talking about highly precise and aggressive movements. And so when I do a skip, I'm not just kind of skipping with a floppy body. I'm very rigid and stiff. I'm doing a skip where when I come up in a very sharp motion. And then when I come back down, I come down sharp and rigid as well. And so I'm making the muscles move in a very precise way, aggressively. That is invaluable as we age, even more valuable, which means I have to plug yet again. If you're listening to this and you're over the age of 0, then you need to go to AtoZrunning.com/free so that we can give you for free our pre-running drills and exercise routine. It only takes 7 to 10 minutes. It's very easy to do. And you say to yourself, why do you want to give that to us for free, Zach? Because we've just been doing that for years now, and we just aren't going to stop. We, of course, do get your email when you do it, and so I guess that's why. We're getting your email. So be it. Give us your email so you can have this thing. All right. You've heard us say that enough times. I'm being funny on purpose. All right, so that's good. But there's more. But wait, there's more. Diet. Nutrition is very important because not only, as they share in another study here in this article, not only does your lean muscle mass go down, but your body fat percentage goes up as you age. And so your diet becomes more important the older you get. And that means a combination of things. That means you need to get the good proteins so that your body can build muscle mass well. That means you need to cut back on the not good fats and sugars because your body is just not doing well with those things the older we get. And so we need to be smarter about the way we fuel our bodies. Smarter in the sense of giving our bodies the right stuff so it can do all these things we're going to ask of it well. And then they also say in the article, they say, stay positive, stay positive. I love it. That's their final suggestion. Stay positive. Because we apparently, we could get kind of morose about this, and we shouldn't, because it's, one, inevitable, and two, we can do things that are productive and help us, even though there's this kind of looming sense of we're declining. It doesn't have to be that quickly. That's for sure. So, interestingly enough, those were their 5 tips, even though the heading said 6 tips, the section heading. But anyway, that's what they gave us. That was the only thing in the article where I paused and said, what? Where's the 6th one? Maybe I missed it. So that was a great resource, the Marathon Handbook. And because it was such a great resource, I was on their website looking at some of their other articles. Sounds like they are a pretty neat outfit, worth investigating. So we got 3 in, and I already feel like I have found the thing that answers all my questions thoroughly. Now the question is just, is it corroborated? And since they were sharing their sources and studies and such, there's already some corroboration present within that. But what else did we find? Because we always share 5. Number 4 on the list was Runner's World. So they did make it to top 5 yet again. And this article is entitled, Aging Doesn't Slow Your Running Down That Much. Okay, thank you for that. What did we get from this article? It sounds like the author of this article read the same studies that the Marathon Handbook person did. As a matter of fact, one of the two of them probably read each other's articles. And now I'm curious, which one was published first? I don't know. I don't have it listed here. All right. So this Runner's World article shares a lot of the same stats. No noticeable decline before age 35, or even, by the way, up to age 40 in some of the elite. They shared a study for elite runners, for specifically with elite runners, and the declines don't really begin until age 40. There can be instances of some declines before that, but it's fairly linear from age 40 to 70, which we found in the other studies, and then begins to increase after age 70, and especially after age 80, by the way. The study that they shared there shows the curve, and the curve doesn't really start ramping up until age 80, and then it just like skyrockets. So even in your 70s, you should be able to maintain fairly consistent. You're going to see some degradation, but it doesn't have to be dramatic. Not yet. I love it. So that was Runner's World. Interestingly enough, unlike most Runner's World articles, this one was very brief, and it was quite concise. Which I found to be surprising, because Runner's World usually is like heavily in-depth. Not necessarily that I feel like they're sharing the stuff that is helpful to my question at the time always, but they usually have a lot to say about a topic. And in this one, it was pretty concise. Next up then, and our final for today, is the 5th article listed was another study, like direct link to PubMed, the public publications research library, and was a direct link to the study. And so now we actually get in the top 5 search results a scholarly journal article, which I find to be really refreshing for one thing, but also is it a helpful one is the question. Like, did the algorithm find a helpful article? Because we already found a bunch of research studies linked to some of those other things, and a lot of them were very on point with our question. This one appears to be on the surface, but is kind of an interesting situation. So the study is entitled The Relationships Between Age and Running Performance Variables in Masters Runners. And that sounds just right in line. It's published, by the way, in the Sports Science Health magazine or publication. And then it was a 2019 study, so relatively recent. Appears to be an examination of the research. So I don't know in this one in particular if they conducted much of the studies themselves. But what is really fascinating is very much a not rigorous study and full of holes, except for that it might just corroborate other studies, which by itself could be helpful. But here's why I say this, because the study took a group of runners, let's call it 50 runners. The exact number is, I think, somewhere around 60 or so. But they took a group of runners, and they basically said, okay, here are your ages, And then they did a whole bunch of tests. What's your VO2 max test? What's your running economy? What are some other things? And they tested a bunch of this. And then they compared them by ages to each other and said, okay, so based on our conclusions, your VO2 max declines with age, and your running economy, maybe it's relatively stable. But what they were doing was comparing one person to another person at different ages. And that is not that informative here in this situation, because it doesn't tell me how my performance declines. It tells me that in general, if I'm this much older than somebody else, I might have this much worse by percentage VO2 max. And that's a highly generalized examination, and may not necessarily carry as much scholarly weight as some of the other sources we found earlier. So that's what we get. It does corroborate the same conclusions that we saw earlier, and so I don't have major questions about it, except that it didn't provide much more than what we already had found. So there you have it. What are our reactions then in conclusion? I think that Marathon Handbook article gives you everything that you need to know and find on the topic. I don't think I could add anything to it except to underscore the question around aerobic conditioning in training, because we talk a lot about lean muscle mass and strength work, but this aerobic question is a question that needs more asking, because the main concern with as you age and running in general is that you become more frail, and so you're more injury prone the older you get, in most senses, not in every sense. But we did see in some of the studies references to how bone density declines when you age. Certainly your connective tissues get more rigid, and so they don't move as well. So if you are doing all the things that are suggested, your nutrition is good, you're doing the strength work, you're doing the neuromuscular activity, the other pillar of reducing the effects of aging is aerobic volume and quality aerobic volume. And the question becomes how to make that happen. It's not whether to do it. You should try to do it. We already saw that had a substantial effect on aerobic frailty, for instance, fending off aerobic frailty years and decades even down the road. And so how do we do that? If I can't run as much and stay healthy, there are other options that are aerobic in nature: cycling, ellipticals, things that are lower impact, all of that. Also, shoe choice can make a difference, where if I can wear shoes that are less impactful on my joints, then I could potentially get in higher volumes of training, quality efforts, and in terms of aerobic training that don't have as much of a detriment to my health. And so I would encourage the pursuit of all the things. And that's where we say, in response to these studies, in response to the articles as they were published, it's abundantly clear that aging does certain things, and it's progressive over time. And there's nothing we can do about that. Fundamentally, it's going to happen, but we can delay it. And there's even suggestion that we can hold it at bay substantially. Maybe not 100%, and we can't necessarily be at our peak fitness for decades, but we might be able to be at our peak fitness longer than the studies show by doing all these things. And we can stay close to our peak fitness for quite a long time. Just because I'm over age 35 does not mean I'm getting slower every year. It just doesn't, based on the research. So let's do what we can as we now react to the search engines and some good information we found there. Let's do what we can to be attentive to all areas: strength, neuromuscular interactivity, aerobic condition, diet and nutrition, all the good things. And I think that is a great answer to your question, Pete. And now we are comfortably ready to move on to the world of running. Getting started with some A to Z runner updates from our crew. Shout outs to Laura, who ran the Grand Rapids Turkey Trot and the Dirty Duel 5K and finished first in her age group in both. Shout out to Claire, who also ran the GR Turkey Trot, finishing first in her age group. And then even more recently, in the Honolulu Marathon, Maria and Erin both competed. Erin finishing in a personal best, second in her age group and 11th overall. And I have to put this in perspective. The reason we say that specifically here, there were 18,000 plus finishers in the Honolulu Marathon this year, marking it, I believe they said, the fourth largest, and it has been for some time, the fourth largest marathon in the USA, behind only the three majors, Boston, New York, Chicago. And so what an incredible achievement. And congratulations to both Maria and Aaron for participating. Aaron for finally achieving an incredible benchmark PR en route as well. And also shout out to Ben participating in the Rock and Roll San Antonio Half Marathon, and Paul, who ran the Wisconsin Indoor Preview, which is a track meet. He ran the 1 mile race, finishing first, smashed the field in that one. Well done, Paul. Awesome. So let's keep talking about fast running and fast racing, because as we get now into some global instances, there's a lot going on in a lot of different places. So we got to start with Valencia Marathon, which is now a week old, but we still need to talk about it because first, notable achievements on the individual level and notable achievements in terms of depth in the race. And we have to share just how incredible this was. Sebastian Sawe of Kenya ran his debut at Valencia this year. He's a well-known distance runner, in particular in the half marathon distance, has run, I think they said 9 half marathons, all 9 of them under 60 minutes, including his best, which is 58.0 something. And with a 58.0 something half marathon, he's one of the best performers in the world in history. So now he runs a full. And as these things go, there's great anticipation. How does he do? Well, he did not disappoint at all. Sawe ran 2:02:05, the second fastest debut of all time, only behind the late Calvin Kiptoom's insane sub 2:02 debut that he ran. And if you recall, Calvin Kiptoom, who holds the world record and then died prematurely in an accident last year. And so now Sawe moves himself in a single effort to number 5 all time. What a performance. Also, he was the world half marathon champion last year. I think I forgot to mention that. So developing his repertoire further with this incredible achievement. But second place was not far behind, and this starts to speak to how incredible Valencia was, not just on an individual level. So Derese Galeta of Ethiopia finished in 2:02:38, 33 seconds back, and marks the fastest second place finish ever. That you can say someone ran 2:02 in change at all and did not win the race is really saying something. And so here Galeta finished 7th all time as well, and falling only just short of the victory in this particular instance. So these two guys up front were fast, but what about everybody else? Well, the answer is yes. In fact, 10 men finished under 2:05, which now marks the most number of sub 2:05 finishers in a single race of all time, ahead of 9 at the Berlin Marathon recently. And so you can see here Valencia's claim, which this race has claimed, they developed this event to be the fastest possible marathon. And so far they continue to move toward that notable. They do not hold the world record yet on their course in the full marathon, although the half marathons do. But the full marathon course is clearly fast, and here is how fast it was. In behind Galeta and Sawe, we had Tedeschi Abraham of Switzerland, who broke his own Swiss national record to run 2:04:40 at 42 years of age. Actually, there's a question he may in fact be 44 years old, according to coach Renato Canova, the famed Italian coach. And he further commented on the message boards. I think it was a fairly strange exchange. We'll come back to that. But Abraham ran a new Swiss record. Then Maru Teferi, not far behind, 4 seconds to be exact, broke the Israeli national record to run 2:04:44. Samuel Fitwi Sibhatu broke the German national record by only 2 seconds, by the way, just narrowly edged it out to run 2:04:56. Johannes Chiappinelli of Italy broke the Italian national record in 2:05:24. And his countryman, by the way, Ilias Aoni, also tied the previous record to the second in 2:06:06. So 2 of them running at or beyond the previous best. by an Italian. And then Andrew Buchanan broke the Australian national record, which was only recently set, by over a minute in 2:06:22. Bia Simbasa of the United States ran number 4 fastest time by an American in 2:06:53. Felician Muhitira broke his own Rwandan record by 2.5 minutes when he ran 2:06:54. Christian Zamora broke the Uruguayan record in 2:09:04. Shokruk Davliatov broke the Uzbekistani record by over 3 minutes in 2:10:06. Yes, I'm still going. Rabi Sianturi broke the Indonesian record in 2:17:16. And finally, Yakuba Guindo broke the Malayan, like from Mali, record in 2:28:59. So, count it. How many national records in this one race? And the answer is tons and tons. And that's only the men's race. We haven't even talked about the women yet. So 10 guys under 2:05, most ever, tons of national records dropping in this one single instance. It just keeps getting better. How about the women's race? Megertu Alemu of Ethiopia won the race in 2:16:49. Very strong finish. Not quite her personal best, but only a shade off. And at that, won the race by almost 2 minutes. And so no late pressure. In fact, she said in a post-race interview she was really feeling it in the late stages of the race, was not pushing as hard. She was relaxing her rhythm, is I think the way she phrased it, which is a common phrase you'll hear marathoners talk about. But she did, in fact, win by almost 2 minutes still. In second place was Stella Chesang of Uganda, who ran a new national record, 2:18:26. So despite the loss, a very impressive time. And Moira Stuartova of Czech Republic ran a new national record, in 2:23:44. Sarah Hall broke the U.S. Masters record in 2:23:44 for 10th place. One of those two times is slightly off, but new Masters record, and she finished 10th overall. And then Nora Sabo broke the Hungarian record in 2:25:52, and Nesrine Line broke the Lebanese record in 2:36:09. So a handful of women's national records, as well as the litany of men's national records. What a race. So let's talk about that comment by Renato Canova, because if you're not familiar with his name, by the way, Canova is basically like the modern Arthur Lydiard. And so if Arthur Lydiard was the coach that like everyone talked about in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and everyone wanted him to come and speak to at their national groups. Everyone wanted him to come and like guest coach for a season with their athletes, all that kind of stuff. That's who Renato Canova has been for the last 20 years, 30 years maybe now. And he in particular has his claim to fame is how he has developed the East African runners. Those who have worked with him in particular, he has quite the accolades, medalists, record breakers, all of the stuff. So his voice tends to be one of authority in the sport. And so after this race, he made a comment to Desi Abraham of Switzerland, who just broke the national record. And then Canova said, okay, that's it. He's done. Like, he's retiring. And everyone was kind of like, wait, even though he is 42, actually 44, according to Canova, he said his passport's wrong, but even though he is 40 some years old, he's still just running his best ever and national records. Why would he be retiring? And the interesting perspective here is Canova says, first of all, his response is, well, he's actually 44 and 44 years is the limit. Is his exact quote. He's posting on the message boards. So 44 years is the limit, which I think actually is not entirely unreasonable to make a kind of statement like that. And we will be following up this conversation with more reflection on that. But from our main topic today, you see that the discussion around age is not insignificant. And so Canova seems to feel that these mid-40s years might be about the right time to say, even if you're at the top of your game, probably time. And here's why I think it's especially fascinating, because he's not really talking about performance when he says this in the message board. He actually further articulated that Abraham has interest in developing now his next steps, his career. In particular, he's Eritrean born, and so he wants to spend time working to try to develop, in some capacity, support the Eritrean efforts to develop their athletes and such. And so Canova's comment was, if he's going to have the time and energy to develop a new career, a new profession, he needs to start now. He shouldn't wait until, who knows how much longer. And so I think that that's fascinating and speaks to a greater depth than just running fast is all that matters, which I think is really important. So here you go. Fascinating things. One more comment from Let's Run, the stat of the week in particular as it relates to Valencia, or rather at marathoning. 0 countries had a national marathon record faster than the US of A in 2002, when Khalid Kanuchi, who Moroccan-born, became an American citizen shortly before that and set a world record in the marathon in 2:05:38. That was the 2002 world record, right? 2:05:38. Since then, 22 years later, no American has run faster than that, but 19 other countries have better national records now than the U.S. national record that currently stands, which is just really interesting, right? Like 22 years as a nation going from having the fastest marathoner ever to not even barely top 20 countries. Okay, so that's curious, but what gets really even more particularly fascinating is when you now look at where the fastest marathoners in history were born, or at least second generation. And the reason why is because they actually now find that to get to someone who is not of African ancestry, you have to get to the 106th fastest marathoner. And that's Brazil's Daniel do Nascimento, who on the all-time list is personal best is 2:04:51. So you can see minutes, 4.5 basically minutes behind the world record is where you have to go to get to the first person who's not of African ancestry, which speaks to the real. There's a caveat. Do Nascimento was busted for doping, and so they're not counting him in that 105, 106 because he's actually 93 on the list. His time. So you can see that actually the first, we would say, fair participant in the marathon is Japan's Kengo Suzuki, who ran 2:04:56. He is 106th on the list. And so we see a kind of overall trend, especially in the last 30 years, where it has become more and more competitive in the marathon in particular. To at a national level, you see a lot of countries succeeding greater because of their, you could say because of where athletes are coming from. And so athletes who are switching nationalities, athletes who are competing in university systems in a different country than where they were born, things like that. And fascinating how much of an effect that kind of, the kind of genetic history seems to have on the marathon. It's really a curious thing. So Let's Run wanted to examine that a little bit. It was a cursory, just a brief look, but we wanted to share some of those reflections. Let's talk now, moving on from Valencia, which was incredible as always. Let's talk about Nike Cross Country Nationals. This is the high school, the first of the 2 high school cross country national races. The second one will be Foot Locker coming soon. And at Nike Cross, we had what amounted to, for the girls' race, the kind of like dream team. All the top competitors, you could say, were showing up this time. And a lot of times there's some division between Nike and Foot Locker. It looks like Nike is starting to attract more and more of the talent pool than Foot Locker. Who knows exactly why. But that includes the likes of Addie Ritzenhein, defending champion. That includes Sadie Engelhart and Elizabeth Leachman, both well known for their prowess on the track, as well as certainly some success in cross country, and both record holders in different events on the track. And then Jane Hedengren, who most recently clocked Addie Ritzenhein by 40 seconds at the regionals, and in so doing ran the fastest ever high school 5K cross-country time by a girl. So now they get to race each other all at once. And these are always our favorite moments. Who would you guess would be the winner? Well, you got to go with momentum here, right? And if you guessed Jane Hedengren, you would be correct. She certainly had all the momentum going into the race, having run that fastest time, having demonstrated that she can beat the very best in the country, like Addie and other compatriots, in significant fashion. So Hedengren proceeded to win the race, not only impressively by 40 seconds, again, she also broke Caitlin Tui's course record, just like a shave of a couple of seconds off, which is really incredible stuff. So what you saw in this race was Hedengren out by herself, just dominating, and then 2nd through 7th place all finished within a few seconds of each other. It was like a tight group. And that just speaks to this depth of talent, this talent pool right now on the girls' side in particular in the high school cross-country ranks. It's really exciting. So 2nd actually went to Victoria Garces, and then Elizabeth Leachman for 3rd. And so in that particular sense, not all the same names that you would guess to be right up front, even at that. And by the way, those two, Garces and Leachman, will be at Foot Locker as well. So you can watch them come back again and see how things go. I don't believe Hedengren's going to be in Foot Locker Championships. So there you have it. The girls' race was incredibly exciting. As one would expect, it was very competitive. On the boys' side, there was not as much of a kind of favorite. And so in that sense, it's like the day for the underdogs, because no one really confidently is likely to win this race. And so it proved to be an upset win by unheralded Charlie Vause, who was only ranked 26th nationally previously, but it was a tough day. It was a nasty day as far as the conditions and the course, and he was toughest of the bunch for sure to take the victory in a narrow win. And then in the team race, a quick note about this, because Colorado's Niwot High School ran the 2nd lowest score ever, which is very impressive. Not easy to do. And they did not have any like superstar top level finishers as far as individuals either. So it was a group effort for sure by Niwot. All right. Let's go back to the track now, because as we progress into the wintertime months, we get to talk indoor track and field for a bit, which is one of the exciting times of the year for sure. And to kick things off, there's always like a handful of these early season meets in December where you take all the cross country runners and they're still fit and fast from cross country, and they jump into one final race, which happens to then be on the track. And that's what the Boston University Opener has become. And it is seriously fast. Always is. Last year, remember, Graham Blanks broke the national record in the 5,000 meters. The NCAA record in the 5,000 meters. Nico Young since broke it further, but that was very impressive. And just continue to see these fast times at this meet. So Graham Blanks is back again. And everyone was talking about, okay, he's going for it again. Going to try to break now Nico Young's record to see if he can take it back. And part of the talk here was the excitement around how chances are this is his final race, because why wouldn't Graham Blanks go pro? He's already an Olympian. He's a 2-time NCAA cross-country champ. Prime moment for him to exit the amateur scene and become a professional runner. So chances are this is his final race. What does he do in his final race? Well, he ended up having to kind of do a solo thing. There wasn't a lot of company in the late stages of the race, but he powered on and ended up running 12:59, which is good for number 2. It was just behind Nico Young's record by only a couple seconds, but he gets under 13 minutes. He's only the 5th American ever to run under 13 minutes indoors on the short track, and promptly signed a professional deal with New Balance, and he's out. He's going pro, folks, and there's no reason not to here. So very impressive run. He also did qualify for the World Championships, for the 2025 World Championships with that time. And so now he's got an automatic qualifier, which is going to help him kind of relax through the season now, where he can focus on the U.S. Championships and see if he can't get himself to another world contest to add to his Olympic berth. All right, how about the women's 5,000? This race was very exciting, in part because you have a rematch of Doris Lemongol of Alabama and Hilda Olamomoy of Florida, who were previously teammates, by the way, at Alabama until Olamomoy transferred. And Lemgol, remember, was NCAA cross-country champ just recently. Olamomoy was not far behind, and so you've got a kind of rematch there, and it turned out to be a record-breaking performance. The two finished within half a second of each other. It was an incredible race. Lemgol broke the collegiate national record, the NCAA record, set by Parker Valby last year, and broke it only narrowly by like 0.2 of a second. In fact, Olamomoy missed Valby's record by only like 0.1 of a second because of how close they were to the record. And so now you have what was an incredible performance by Valby last year. She actually broke the collegiate record twice, and her improvement on the record, you recall, bested the 2009 record set by Jenny Simpson, and at the time I think her name was Behringer, Jenny Behringer, maiden name. And so that record stood for 14 years before Valby broke it, and now not even 12 months later it's been broken again. And the question is, how much more will it be broken again at some point this year? Because there's no reason to believe that Lemgol doesn't have more in the tank here. And those weren't the only two fast ones in the race either, because Amy Bunnage of Australia, running collegiately right now in the United States, also broke the Australian indoor record by 15 seconds. She ran 15 flat 0.7. Oh, I forgot to mention Lemgol's record is 14:52 now. 14:52.57. So Bunnage broke the Australian indoor record as a collegian, breaking the national record to run 15 flat, which is just incredible. Understandably, Australia does not compete indoors as much as other nations because if you are familiar with the reverse seasons, this is Australia's summertime now. This is actually their main track season. And so because the rest of the world is doing indoors while Australia is doing its regular track season for the most part, things are a little bit different there. So there you go, new national record for her. But then those weren't the only fast ones, because now within that race you have 4 runners. The first 4 across the line there now are the 2nd through 5th fastest all-time. Well, no, not 2nd through 5th, but on any track, 2nd through 5th fastest all-time 5,000 meter performances. And so, like, between those 4, only Parker Valby has run as fast as them, is basically the stat here. And that's just an incredible thing. In one single race, the top 5 fastest collegiate times were just rewritten in all cases except one, which is amazing how fast they ran. So then the men's 3,000 meters was just as incredible. In fact, things just keep getting better is how this goes, because history was rewritten when Ethan Strand and Parker Wolf of UNC, teammates at UNC, took over the race late and just crushed it. Their finish was so incredible. They finished side by side, just neck and neck. Strand only barely took over Parker Wolf in the last like 20 meters of the race, and ran now between the two of them number 4 and number 6 all-time U.S. 3,000 meter performances. I'm not just talking indoor track. I'm talking all-time number 4 and number 6. The only people who have run as fast as these two collegians just did are all Olympic medalists in the USA. Those names include the national record holder, Grant Fisher, include Yared Nuguse, include Bernard Lagat, and include Galen Rupp. Those are the 4 guys who have run as fast as these two just did. They did it in the same race on the same day, and their teammates, and it just is insane. They broke the NCAA record by 6 seconds together to run, both of them 7:30, and Strand again edging out Parker Wolf. Galen Rupp sneaks in between the two of them because his time is like 0.02 of a second slower than Strand's and like 0.05 of a second faster than Wolf's, and so he's right in between them. But that's just incredibly fast, and that means that they're just right up there with the very best the United States has to offer. And so it gets fast at front, but that NCAA record was not just broken by Strand and Wolf. 2 more collegians in this race also ran faster than the previous record, including Yassine Abdullah. Strange fact, Yassine Abdullah is Sudanese American, and so Sudan actually had asked him to run in the Olympics for Sudan, and he did, and he ran in the marathon, and he had never run a marathon before, so it was his first ever. He ran 2:11 and change to finish 33rd in the Olympic marathon in the midst of his collegiate running career, and then went back to run what amounts to 7:34 and in 3,000 meters, which is a Sudanese national record, as well. Sorry, not a Sudanese national record, but his marathon was a Sudanese marathon national record, and so he's got it all apparently. That's Abdullah. But then in fourth, Gary Martin, a sophomore from Virginia, who you recall broke 4 minutes in the high school mile when he was in high school, and did it in just the strangest scenario where it's just basically kind of running by himself in like a local conference meet, and somehow just pulled it off, which is amazing. That just never happens. Well, though one of the lesser acclaimed stars of that U.S. high school class of 2022, he is really killing it now, running 7:36 to just narrowly edge out the previous 3,000 meter NCAA record. So there you have it. 4 guys, now the top 4 NCAA collegians ever in the 3,000 all in one race. Just keeps getting more and more exciting. All right, final. We've got a bonus for you this time because we could not end the show today without at least mentioning the 60-year-old who set a new world record for the 60-plus age groups in the mile. This is for the women's mile. As reported by Canadian Running Magazine, anyone have a guess how fast Anne Gilshinan of Ireland ran 1 mile at 60 years of age? The answer is she ran 5:27, which is 3 seconds faster than the previous record, which was only set earlier this year by American Sue McDonald in 5:30. This, by the way, is Gilshinan's second world 60-plus age group record. She turned 60 in April and has since broken the 1,500-meter record as well, which she ran at the World Masters Championships in August, and she ran that in 4:59, being the only woman over age 60 to run under 5 minutes. And by the way, if you do the quick math, a 1,500 and a mile are only 109 meters difference, and most people running at about the pace that she's running can cover 109 meters in about 15, 16 seconds, maybe 17 or 18, depending. And so if you do the numbers, she should be able to run a full mile in 5:15 to 5:20 minimum, given that 1,500 performance. So why don't we assume she's got a whole lot more mile records in store? She also, by the way, held at least 6 55 to 59 world age group records in addition. So keep your eyes on Anne Gilshinan of Ireland, and those are going to be exciting times. Well, speaking of exciting times, you get to take a break from hearing Zach's voice in your ears, and we're certainly always grateful for the chance to be able to bring to you some of these thoughts and ideas that we feel can benefit us as runners in the efforts that we have. And so as we start to wrap up now our series on challenging the search engine to see what it has to say on these topics, we're going to continue on with more and more of the kinds of topics that we feel can help you the most. And if you would like to contribute to our thinking, you can always do that. Share comments on the places where you find our content, share thoughts or questions. You can always email us directly, questions@AtoZrunning.com, and many other places that you can find where we are and interact. We certainly hope to hear from you. We certainly look forward to speaking with you again next week. But for now, we'll talk to you then.